Yeah, from the culture
to the courtroom.
This is Truth Uncut. From the culture to the courtroom, front row seats. When Dennis Byron speaks, history speaks. From the culture to the courtroom, front row seats. When Dennis Byron speaks, history speaks. From the culture.
No cap, no spin, just facts. If it matters, we cover it. On Shreddy B.I.B. Ooh, Byron wanna know. Ooh, it's shit the Dennis Byron show.
All right. Put a 1 in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. This is a late breaking development in the case involving the Minneapolis protests, where we see on camera that some people had decided to exercise their First Amendment right. And I have no problem with it. But first and foremost, make sure when you get in here, put a 1 in the chat and hit the thumbs up and make sure you're following us. Let me get on camera. Okay. All right. Here we go. All right. Okay. We're here. Okay. I want to make sure I'm on camera now. Oh boy. Listen, the First Amendment, ladies and gentlemen, is definitely being challenged in this unfortunate move on Minneapolis, and how the ICE is moving throughout not just Minneapolis, but throughout the country. And we've seen countless videos of abusive tactics that ICE agents have used against protesters. This particular story hits close to home because, one, I'm a journalist, and two, I've covered many protest rallies in America. And I asked a question last week. Actually, it was this week on Twitter. And the question was Don Lemon wrong for entering into the church? And there was mixed opinions about that. And I just got a mixed one today, one just a few minutes ago. Shout out to Class E. I saw your tweet. But the question is, was Don Lemon wrong for entering into the church? Well, I asked, was he following the story? Because typically, if you're following the story and it leads you inside a church, then it should be protected under the First Amendment. And right now, it appears that a judge agrees with my theory. And that is that just a couple of hours ago, FBI agents, along with Homeland Security, arrested several protesters who were a part of that entering into the church. And one of the protesters is not just a protester, she's an attorney. She's a well-known attorney in Minnesota. And she's also a former head of the Minnesota chapter of NAACP. So this is why this is a problem. Not necessarily for her, but while Don Lemon's First Amendment has been clearly upheld by this judge, the right of Nekima Levy Armstrong's right to protest is being challenged now. And it's being challenged by the Department of Justice, Pam Bondi, and as well as members of the Trump administration. Now, we don't have to go too far back, but if we want to go a little far further back, we can look at what happened during the 60s. We can look at what happened during 2020 and how protests were all over the country. We can look at what happened in Ferguson, Missouri, and we can look at what happened in New York City, and we can look at what happened in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and in Los Angeles, California. Protesting is a form of making those you're protesting against aware that maybe you might be doing something wrong. So why do you think President Trump unleashed Pam Bondi on a protected right by attorney Armstrong, because she's an attorney. She's not just a protester, she's an attorney who understands the Constitution and, more importantly, the First Amendment. So this is going to play out in court, and this is going to be significant. This is going to be significant for a number of reasons. The story was that there was a pastor that apparently is a member of ICE, and he's the director of the St. Paul's Minneapolis chapter or division of the ICE agency. And that's a story. Now, the question that many are going to ask, why did it have to go down in the church? And we have to look at what the law says. We have to look at what the law says. We have to do a little deep dive in what the law says about protesting inside of a church. And how does this create a federal charge or several charges? I'm going to post a story that was published not too long ago. This story was published not too long ago on Hip Hop Inquirer. So let's just go look at this. Let's go look at what happened here. The title is Federal Judge Warns Department of Justice to Leave News Reporters Alone While Allowing Arrest of Protesters. And this is what happened today. And so basically, federal agents arrest Minnesota civil rights activist attorney Nekima Levy Armstrong, and a federal judge has refused to greenlight the charges against journalist Don Lemon have turned local church protests into a national flashpoint for free speech, press freedom, and Black activism. Because this was a protest, and this Black activism is necessary to bring the attention to the cause. And the cause is that Blacks and Browns have been attacked by ICE, as we can see in previous videos. The clash also sits right at the intersection of hip hop and the hip hop culture, movements, politics, and state power that Hip Hop Inquirer readers know all so well. You know it well because you see me covering a lot of these stories, and I just don't report on music releases and concerts. We talk about these type of issues because it affects the culture as well. And the culture of hip hop and members of the culture have used their voices by way of music, their pen, their art, their creativity to bring awareness to these type of social issues. So we have Pam Bondi, and then we have Attorney Armstrong. Two lawyers that are likely going to go toe-to-toe in a courtroom if these charges stick. So Nekima Levy Armstrong, a longtime Twin Cities activist and attorney, was taken into federal custody over her alleged role in the disrupted protests inside a city's church in St. Paul's, where demonstrators called out a pastor's reported leadership role at ICE. The service was interrupted as protesters challenged what they saw as a pastor preaching on Sunday while helping run an agency accused of tearing immigrant families apart during the week. And we've seen the videos. We've seen some very awful videos. And we've seen things that we've never seen before. And we also have heard that there may likely be members of an organization that has went silent from the 2020, 2019, 2021 situation was happening, for example, in DC, January 6th, the Proud Boys. There are many that believe the Proud Boys, and at least the head of the Proud Boys, has joined ICE. Because one would ask, why is such a very well-known organization, very far right, that has went quiet? And we look at and I looked at a video the other day, and it was a video of some sheriffs that pulled up on ICE agents. And the way the agents were dressed, the sheriffs were making fun of these agents. And I have the clip somewhere. I may post it on my social media. But the point is, some of these agents don't even look like professional members of law enforcement. You know, you have some that are wearing GoPro cameras, some are wearing sneakers. Well, not that you can't wear sneakers if you're doing operations, but they didn't appear to be in the proper uniform or the proper regalia that they typically would wear, you know, as a member of, for example, the Customs Border Patrol agents. So this looks very kind of loosely ran. So Attorney General Pam Bondi framed the action as a coordinated attack on a place of worship, signaling that the Trump administration is ready to treat the protests not just as a disruption, but as a serious federal offense. For many in the Black and brown communities, that rhetoric echoes a familiar pattern. Peaceful or nonviolent protests rebranded as a threat to justify heavy-handed response. We just came off of the heels of the celebration of the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. And what would Dr. King say about this new approach to dealing with protesters? He would be saying a lot about it because he was a nonviolent activist in the course of social justice and activism in the civil rights movement. So now this administration wants to jail protesters because they are speaking out against injustice against immigration. And here's the thing. I saw in a previous interview with Kristi Noem, who touted these numbers. She said 70% of the immigrants that were arrested because they had criminal backgrounds or violent crimes. She touted those numbers. But I like to see the details in those numbers. And how did she come up with those numbers? But the fact that these numbers are being thrown out there is in my belief, is done to try to justify the behavior of this newly brand ICE. I say newly brand because they're on the streets of multiple cities around the country under the guise, and I say guys, someone say no, they're doing their job, under the guise of trying to eradicate the bad people from the country, the immigrants. I don't know how this is going to end well. I really don't. The charges and what they mean. Federal officials say Armstrong is being pursued under a conspiracy against rights civil rights statute, a law that makes it a crime for two or more people to agree to threaten or intimidate someone while they exercise protected rights, such as attending religious services. Interesting. Conspiracy against rights. Sounds familiar? Probably because those who are old enough, remember what happened during the 60s. What happened during the 60s? COINTELPRO went in to disrupt the orderly actions of protesters. We remember that. Some of us do. Some of you need to do some research. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. And I know people are saying, Mr. Byron, get on board. No, I can't just get on board with something that doesn't make sense. And let's talk about why this is a problem. Well, when the warrant application was made to a federal judge, the Department of Justice lawyers wanted journalist Don Lemon to be a part of the arrest and charge him with similar crimes that they have charged Attorney Armstrong and others with. Well, the judge said, no, hands off of the reporter. He was following the story. But the fact that the attempt was made to get a magistrate judge to sign off on the application for arrest warrant against Don Lemon poses a major problem for journalists across the nation who are covering these behaviors of ICE agents. So what we have to do, ladies and gentlemen, is more journalists, and Don is an independent journalist now, but he is a well-known independent journalist. More journalists need to be on the front line covering stuff like this because it is protected under the First Amendment. And because it's protected under the First Amendment, this is more the reason why independent journalists, as well as journalists tied to major news organizations, need to be at the front line of this. Have to be. Must be. Because when the cameras are off, strange things happen. Strange things happen. So the cameras need to be on. The revolution needs to be televised because this looks like a revolution, ladies and gentlemen. Supporters argue that the charges stretch these laws to punish political dissent, not to protect worshipers, but not to protect worshipers. For organizers who grew up in hip hop like myself, the tradition of calling out state violence is normal. From NWA to Kendrick Lamar, this looks less like law and order and more like the state turning civil rights tools against the very people that it was meant to protect. That's what it looks like. That's what it looks like. We are doing a reverse Uno on civil rights. I saw a video earlier this morning, and it was of journalist Tucker Carlson speaking, and then I see the numbers being touted now by Elon Musk, and I see that his show has gone viral, and they're talking about the replacement theory. You guys go look at it. I'm not going to put too much into it because I need to do my research on top of the research that he did. But there are people in this country that are very scared. They're scared because they believe that some that doesn't look like them are taking over. And that, if those numbers are accurate, well, that would make those people feel concerned. And I believe from what I understood him saying was that from 1950 to now, there's been a grave shift in the population of non-Blacks across several major cities. It was California, it was Detroit, it was New York, it was Philadelphia, more of the blue states. This is what Tucker Carlson was pointing out in the show. But again, you go watch the video. So is that one of the reasons why these things are happening right now? Is it about removing illegal aliens that the administration believe have committed crimes? Or it's about pushing these quote unquote illegal aliens out so they won't have the ability to participate in elections around these major cities? Ask yourself a question. Is that a fear that the administration is having? Because now we also hear talk about IDs to vote, having individuals take IQ tests in order for them to qualify to vote. And you must, according to President Trump, this was just posted, have an IQ over 100 in order for you to participate in voting. Now, what does that look like? Interesting that he mentions the IQ, and this is interesting that maybe this My IQ, which is a service that have been spamming many people taking the IQ test. Well, I took the IQ test yesterday. I took it and I posted my results. So I'm passing the voters requirements based on my IQ. However, when I looked at the analysis of my IQ and the results that came back, my IQ was at the upper, I won't say upper echelon, but the high numbers. There are 8 billion people in the world. 8 billion. I scored above the 7 point something billion mark. Above that. But what happens to those who fall below? What happens to those who don't get an IQ above 100? Their vote shouldn't count? But if they're breathing and they live on Earth and they live in America, their vote should matter. But you now have to have an IQ of 100 above. That's like saying you should have some knowledge of, based on the IQ examination, you should have knowledge of some of the most complicated things in America. And what does that look like? What does that really look like? There are people that I would probably argue would not pass that test. Pass it in that you would get over 100 score. But what does that mean? You forget the people that don't score high? I just don't get it. I really don't. But in any event, Don Lemon, the cameras, and a blocked warrant. That's what we're talking about. While Armstrong faces federal heat, a judge just sent a strong message about the press. Prosecutors tried to bring Don Lemon, who was on the scene filming and reporting on the protest, into the case, but a federal magistrate judge refused to sign off on the charges against him, rejecting the government's attempt to criminalize his presence as a journalist. He was just there following the story. He might have got a tip. We're going to be here. If you want to get exclusive, pull up. Happens all the time. Happens to me, happens to other journalists. You got the tea, pull up if you want to get the story. And that's just what he did. He followed the story. The story led him inside the building. He wasn't leading the protest. He followed the protest. Lemon has said he was there strictly to cover the story, not to help coordinate it, and press freedom advocates warned that charging him would have put every reporter who pulls up to a protest on notice. Absolutely. The judge move doesn't end at all. It doesn't end the risk at all, but it draws a line. Being behind the camera at a protest is not a crime, at least not yet. So it's not a crime. Nor is it a crime for you, the citizen journalist, to hold your phone up and record what's happening, as long as you stay out of the direct line of a crime. But you can record. You can record everything. So when you see an ICE agent slap someone's phone out their hand, they're breaking the law, because you have a First Amendment right to record, to document, and to tell your story. Your phone is no different than my SLR camera. Mine's is a little more powerful, and Big Bertha gets the bigger shot, but your phone, and some of these phones really have great cameras on them. So don't be deterred by someone telling you you cannot record. if you're in public space. Don't be deterred by that. You can record. And we must protect the First Amendment now more than ever, because we see that how many things have seemed like it's reverted back to the 60s. And you say, Mr. Byron, this is crazy. You're being too dramatic. No, I'm not. I'm really not. I'm seeing things unfold daily, and I'm taking inventory, and I'm taking notes. So I would just say that thank you to the federal judge that understood the assignment that Don Lemon had, but you fell short, Your Honor. You fell short because you arrested a protester situated in a protest that wanted to be brought attention to in that church. It's just crazy. I cannot believe that protesters are now feared to get out and protest. What does that mean? That means you can't object to criminal behavior using nonviolence? What does that really mean? So, why this hits home for hip hop? Why does this hit home for hip hop? The stakes here goes way beyond one church and one city. Hip hop has always documented the front lines, police stops, immigration raids, courtrooms, and streets where people fight back. And what happened in St. Paul is part of that same story of communities pushing back against systems they say are criminalizing their existence. And I would like to believe that I have documented some of the most crucial moments in hip hop history. And initially, when I started doing this thing we call journalism, it was because of a trial I was covering in New York City. But then I was also covering a situation that happened in my neighborhood that made national papers. It was a big story. It was involving a young man by the name of Larry Davis. Sorry, guys. This was involving Larry Davis. And it was involving also members of the police department. And I don't know if you guys remember the story involving Larry Davis, but according to Larry Davis, there were members of the NYPD that he alleged that they had him moving that weight in the street. And then they came out to try to kill him. But it didn't go down like that. They brought in the ESU, which is the emergency service unit in New York City. You guys can do the research. And went to his Fulton Avenue apartment to try to arrest him. But he had a different plan for them. A shootout ensued and he got away. He was able to tell his story. So my point is, that happened in my own neighborhood. It was a national story. Or at least it was a national story. But it made me want to get out and see why the police moved in that manner. And it was just it was a very big urban legend story that he fought back. He didn't allow them to just assassinate him, and he came out and he did what he had to do. So it is our job as members of the press to document history without fear or favor. We must be the eyes and ears for those who don't want to go out there. We have to be. Stand by, guys. Stand by. Okay, all right. So you remember that. I'm looking at some of the comments, guys, but hold on a second here. I'm going to get back to the comments, but let me just finish talking about this, as this is a very important. I'm going to zoom in a little for you guys. So Armstrong's arrest shows how quickly protest leaders, especially Black women in movement spaces, can go from community advocates to federal defendants. The attempt to pull Don Lemon into this case shows how easily the state might try to drag the storyteller into the crosshairs too, blurring the lines between covering the movement and conspiring with it. So the lines are not blurred for me. I understood the assignment. And Don Lemon is a very courageous reporter for being there on the front lines. Those who are willing to stand on the front lines to cover the story, it takes balls. It takes guts. When I was in Ferguson, Missouri, covering the shooting death of Mike Brown and being tear gassed in the evening, I didn't even have a mask. I had my clothes. I didn't have a mask. And I didn't know where it was coming from. And then, I haven't shared this story, but I was in a vehicle traveling past the police station. Shots rang out by the police station in Ferguson. But it didn't deter me. I went on to do the next story. When I was in Sanford, Florida, covering the death of Trayvon Martin at the hands of George Zimmerman, there were protests there. I didn't stay home and cover the protests. I went there to cover the protests. So when you see these charges being filed against Attorney Armstrong, you have to ask yourself a question. Are they trying to silence her under the guise of protecting the church? Or is she justified in what she's doing to bring attention to the story about the pastor that is the director of ICE in St. Paul's? And you'll say, why is that a problem? It's a major problem. If you're in the church preaching one message, but you're in the street, you're leading those in the street on doing something opposite of what you're supposed to be standing for in your messaging. So, again, this is going to be a very interesting case. A very interesting First Amendment case. And you have subpoena power. You have the ability. Now that she's charged, she has the ability to drag certain individuals in. That's why this case is so significant. You would say, Mr. Byron, who would she drag in? Who would she pull in? Well, she could subpoena people. Her legal team could subpoena people from the Department of Justice. And what is the policy of this new Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice? Because the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice was established to protect those that have been abused in history. Let's not forget why the Civil Rights Division worked for people of color. It wasn't about being woke. It was about making sure people weren't being abused and their rights weren't being abused. So what are the marching orders for the Assistant Attorney General that oversees the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice? What are their marching orders now? What does civil rights mean to this administration? You got to think about it. What does it mean? Well, an activist was just arrested, trying to help protect the civil rights of others. Think about that. She was arrested because she was trying to protect the civil rights of others. An attorney. She's an attorney that was the head of the NAACP. Think about that. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, she was a part of. So now you have the division of the Civil Rights, Civil Rights Division in the Department of Justice going after her. Think about that. This typically would have been like maybe a trespass, maybe a trespass that people have went to jail protesting injustice. Do your research. People have went to jail for protesting, peaceful protests. This was a peaceful protest. This wasn't a violent protest. This was a peaceful, non-violent protest. That's what we're talking about. So, what to watch next? Armstrong now faces a legal fight that could set the tone for how far the Trump administration is willing to go in prosecuting protests that confront immigration enforcement and its allies. Federal officials have already signaled more arrests may be coming, raising the possibility of a wider crackdown or organizers linked to the church action. Today is this church. What is next? What is next? So all we have right now are the federal judges that will put the brakes on some of these injustices. Will this deter other protesters from coming and standing for the people? You'll say, Mr. Byron, what are you talking about here? Well, unfortunately for the many, I've seen how laws can be abused. I've seen how it can be abused. So on the media side, the blocked attempt to charge Don Lemon is a win. It's a definite win. It's a win for media. But it's also a warning shot about the future of protest coverage in this era. For Hip Hop Inquirer, for our readers, that means the battles over who gets to speak, who gets to organize, and who gets to document it are only getting louder, and the culture will be right in the middle of it. We'll be right in the middle of it. We have to be. We have to be. If you need some motivation, go play a Public Enemy song or go play an NWA song. Just if you need some motivation. If you need some motivation, that's what you need to do. But we, the people, must stand up for those who don't have the power to stand up for themselves. And that's just what it is. That's what we have to do. So you say, Mr. Byron, they're going to be knocking on your door. For what? I'm about to retire. Oh, man. No, hold on. Don't miss the message. A peaceful protest is a peaceful protest. And someone brought this to my attention. The church opened the door for everyone. Everyone. The church is open for everyone. That's the way a lot of these churches are telling people, everyone come in. Everyone's welcome. Take a seat. Grab a book. Just come in. Come in and get the word. Come get the word. So you can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. The door's open for everyone to come in. This is the church's motto. I didn't know that you would not, you need an invite. You need a card. Excuse me, guys. Let's have some water here. Listen. Well, class, I love my brother Class E, but Class E, I had to disagree with you here, Class E. Don Lemon is a reporter. He's earned the badge of journalist. He's earned that badge, Class E. He's earned that badge. And I'm not going to play the man like that. He's earned that badge of a journalist. He's in the streets. He's asking right questions. I have to support him on that as a journalist, bringing the story to the people. I have to. And you know I love you to death. But on this side, I have to support, him as a journalist, a working journalist, doing his job. Well, yes. Listen, again, being on the front line is not easy. It's not easy. It's not sexy, but it's necessary. It's very necessary. So I get it. Some people that are not on the front line and are not in that, just close your eyes and imagine you being on the ground when that happened. And just imagine you as a journalist and you got a tip that there was something about to go down. Would you stand on the sideline or would you follow the story? Because you got to remember the hat that you wear and when to wear the hat. And that was an opportunity for him to cover that story. Class, listen, you and I gonna have to go get a Heineken. I don't know, whatever. A Michelob, I don't know what you drink or whatever, or Arnold Palmer. We're gonna talk about this. We're gonna have a conversation about this. Now, let's talk about some of the fallout that my brother Don Lemon has received. And we're gonna talk about the elephant in the room. Nicki Minaj. Nicki Minaj came out and spoke about how she felt and what he allegedly did. And that was his job as a journalist. And she had some choice words. I mean, it's hip hop. She brought the smoke. And he didn't like it either. He didn't like the smoke that she brought, but he tried to keep it classy, until he said the border. Now, Don, you went a little too far there. Now. You hit below the belt, but I know we do that. Sometimes I do it, so I get it. You told her. You said she should be deported. Oh my goodness! I mean, she came for you. You came back. You clapped back. It was a clap back. Might not have been my choice of the clap back, but again, I wasn't the one affected. So my clap back is different than your clap back, but that was your clap back. And I get it, but when you clap back too hard, now people are coming around against, they're taking sides. I try to stay in the middle, I try to stay in the middle. And in that case, you were personally attacked and you came back and gave the energy that was given to you. You couldn't have did that on CNN back in the day. That you now feel the beauty of being an independent journalist, and you can pretty much let people know how you feel for all these years. Some would say, why did you hold back so long? And we know it's the corporate dollars. I see you, I see Chris Cuomo, I see other Joy Reid. I see all these journalists that were under these corporate umbrellas now coming out and speaking your truth. Speaking your truth. How does it feel to be on the other side now? How does it feel to be on the other side? Being able to tell your truth and tell the story at the same damn time. It feels good. You waited a little too long to do it, but I digress. You did what you did. Yes, it was an important story, ladies and gentlemen. A very important story. Listen, do me a favor. Make sure, if you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe right now. This is an important story because it involved a colleague and someone, not only the colleague, but it involved an attorney. It involved an attorney who was simply there to make sure the rights of others weren't being violated and make sure that the person or persons that might likely be orchestrating this violation are held accountable. That's different. I mean, the way people protested in the 60s are different in the 2000s. It's different. And I want to try to get, while I have my phone that's been going off, I'm going to see if I can get someone on the phone and see if they can provide some context to what they believe this arrest means. And hopefully he picks up. Hopefully he picks up. Stand by, guys. This is a live call. I don't know if he's watching. He might be in the courtroom. We'll see.
Please leave your...
Okay, he didn't pick up. Okay. I am not going to Minnesota. No. Somehow I feel like it's Minnesota's gonna come here. That's what I feel like right now. This other individual, I would call that individual, but they're about to take a very big, high-profile gig, and if I call them, I might jeopardize. Hold on a second. Hold on. Okay, he's called me back. G, we are live right now. We are live. And I just finished doing the story regarding the arrest of Miss Nekima Levy Armstrong.
Yeah, that's what I thought you would be doing. Oh, so we live right now?
We're live right now. Everyone's listening. Say hello.
How you doing?
Okay, so my question to you is, knowing what your role is as, NAACP president of, correct me if I get the title wrong, because you were elevated. Former president. Past president. She too was a past president in Minnesota or Minneapolis.
Yes.
What was your feeling learning that the Department of Justice decided to file charges against her?
More weaponization of the criminal justice system by the current administration. You have a civic leader and a civil rights attorney who was merely standing up for the rights of those that are being oppressed by ICE. And now they've weaponized the justice system against her. But now she's joined a long line of civic and social justice leaders and standing up, similar to Claudette Colvin, Rosa Parks, Fred Gray, Dr. King himself. Sometimes, you got to get into some good and necessary trouble, to quote our brother John Lewis, and that's exactly what she did.
And there were, I looked at I don't have the indictment in front of me or the charges in front of me. The judge, the federal judge in that matter declined to sign an arrest warrant against journalist Don Lemon. What's your thoughts about that, even for Pam Bondi to even want that to happen when he's doing his job as a journalist?
My opinion is Attorney General Bondi needs to go read the First Amendment again. A reporter has an absolute obligation to report on newsworthy things like a protest of that magnitude in Minneapolis after the killing of Renee Good. So I applaud Don Lemon for standing strong and reporting and speaking truth to power. And I know that no federal magistrate would charge somebody for simply doing an interview while there's some type of civil unrest going. If that's the case, then CNN reporters would have been arrested in 2020, and there would be no reporters embedded in any armed conflicts, because all of that would then open themselves up to criminal prosecution. So I think that the magistrate made the right decision, and I'm confused why the Justice Department would try to charge a reporter for simply reporting on ongoing newsworthy information.
We talk about the First Amendment. The First Amendment also protect protesters. What would you say to protesters in Georgia who want to stand up for the rights of those who are unable to?
Just remember that the First Amendment and all your amendment rights protect you against unlawful overreach by the government. And sometimes the government will overreach, but you need to make sure you stand on your principles of freedom, justice, peaceful, nonviolent protest, and ultimately the criminal justice system will effectively move the way you need it to do in a trial. You know, you can have anybody arrested for any reason. That does not mean that they're going to be convicted. And so I think that, you know, in the spirit of the civil rights movement, many people were arrested and ultimately had their day in court and ultimately were exonerated. So I'd say to the protesters, continue to stand up in a peaceful, nonviolent way and join the pantheon of ancestors who were smiling down on you for getting in some good and necessary trouble. Last
question. This case, if it moves forward, it will likely land. It may likely land at the steps of the Supreme Court. The way the court is structured right now, do you see this being something that the court would take up, or do you see that the court will go, you know, just rest on the Constitution and not try to find a loophole for the administration?
I think the Supreme Court will rule under already settled precedent. You know, New York Times versus Sullivan is one case that comes to mind for the freedom of press. And so that's one of the reasons why you couldn't charge Don Lemon anyway. And then there are other cases that stand for the proposition of First Amendment protected speech from protest, namely the flag burning case and a couple others that are escaping me right now. So I don't think the Supreme Court would side with this administration's lawlessness. I also think that the federal courts in Minneapolis have already cited that some of the actions by the Department of Homeland Security and ICE are violative of the Constitution and has limited them through an adjournment, even joined them on that behavior. So I think ultimately it will not make it to the Supreme Court. I think it'll be taken care of in the district court or even the court of appeals.
I'm listening. Hello?
Yeah, did you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. I put you. Okay, you sound much better now. Okay, so you don't believe it will make it to the Supreme Court. So
No.
what is the end? What do you think the end goal is for the administration?
I think the end goal for the administration is to continue to sow fear and discord. And I think that they think they're doing a great job of doing that, but what they're actually doing is creating more martyrs and creating more newsworthy coverage, because before this, it was only independent journalists and not mainstream journalists that were covered. Now it's gone mainstream because you've now arrested a civil rights attorney and a former NAACP president. And so now you're going to get the mainstream civil rights organizations and the mainstream media engaged in this conversation, especially once it goes to court. And so it's one thing to arrest somebody, it's another thing to convict them. I look forward to seeing how this case plays out in a courtroom. I think that our dear sister up there will be freed and then ultimately exonerated.
Do you know what her status is right now? Has she been released?
No, she's currently in the custody of the FBI. I think she has a first appearance hearing either this afternoon or later tonight. And then she'll be granted bond because she has no prior criminal history. She'll be out, and then she'll ultimately have to go through the process.
Had you researched the actual charges, what they look like, the statute looks like? Have you looked at the statute?
I haven't. I know from what I'm hearing from secondary sources that they're going to charge her with violation of the FACE Act, which basically says that you're terrorizing congregants who are trying to exercise the freedom of religion. I think the maximum penalty, if it is the FACE Act, is 10 years. But again, given what we all saw on live stream and the fact that the congregation initially invited them in, I think at very best, this may have been a misdemeanor trespass, but not a federal violation of the FACE Act. So I think it's definite prosecutorial overreach, and I'm sure her lawyers will have a lot of motions to file in this case to ultimately get the charges dismissed.
Well, I thank you for taking the time and taking my call. Typically you pick up on the first ring, but this didn't happen, so I had to call you back again.
I appreciate that, man. I was on the other line. You didn't tell me you needed give media commentary on breaking news, but I appreciate you.
Yeah, always going to reach out to you. This is your bailiwick. This is what you do. This is your this is what you do. I mean,
yeah, this is my calling. This is my practice. So yeah,
this is it. I appreciate you, my brother, and thank you. And I'll see you in the next protest.
I appreciate you. Have a good day.
You too. Now, bye bye.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, guys. They don't, as I get older, they don't answer on the first ring, but they answer. All right, let me see what some of the comments say. Let's see what some of the comments say. Hold on. Okay, I'm gonna hit the first one. Yeah. Martin Luther King Jr. argued that people have a moral duty to disobey unjust laws. Amen. Amen. I agree with you. Let's see here. We're going to read some of these comments. Make sure you are following. I'm not going to post that one. Let me see what it says. She says, the only mistake Don is making is that he will not stay neutral. He keeps interjecting his personal feelings and stuff, and he needs to stop. Okay, so let's talk about that. Journalists have the right to have an opinion. I have opinions. Many people have opinions. But you put out the facts and you can have an opinion. You don't have to be mute to the problems that you see. You report the story, and if you want to speak about what your opinion is based on the reporting, then you have the right to do that. So I don't criticize him for having an opinion. I would be a little disappointed if he didn't have an opinion about what he's in the mix. He's in the belly of the beast covering the story. So I don't have a problem with that. But it wasn't me. It was you who had the problem. Okay. Okay, so you follow up with this question. Your question is, what exactly were they trying to protest, though, in the church? They were upset because the pastor has something to do with ICE. ICE is a law enforcement agency. Why do people not understand that? Well, I think the biggest problem here is, and I'm just trying to answer your question. The biggest problem here is the tactics that have been used and that has been captured on camera from members of ICE. Renee Good was shot in the head, in the chest, in the arm. We saw the reporting by a independent autopsy examination. What people are upset with is the methods in which these agents are using in dealing with the public. That's where they're upset. And if they feel if they believe, and this is only my speculation, if they believe that one of the parishioners, no, the pastor, one of the pastors of that church is leading that region and how these officers are behaving, they want to bring that to the forefront. And so how do you bring that to the forefront? You bring it to, you take it to them, that person. You take it to that person. Would that protester receive the same result had they waited outside the church? Or would he have been able to leave? Well, I didn't see him on camera, so I don't know what was even there that day. But it's almost like saying it's okay to protest, but you should protest in this area. We're going to designate an area for you to protest. We're going to put you in this box, and you can sit in this box, and you can move around in a circle and protest in that box. But is that really a protest? That's not really a protest, because if you're going to accept to be placed in this particular box, that's not really a protest. That's more of conforming to what is established by the overseers of what you're doing. So it's not really a protest. So, we have to see, ladies and gentlemen, we have to see how this thing goes. But one up for the First Amendment and how this judge has dealt with Don Lemon. I'm glad that at least the judge understood the importance of him covering this story. I mean, I don't have an issue with that. And I don't want to see working journalists arrested for doing their job and bringing the news to the public. Don't want to see journalists arrested for that at all. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tapping in. I appreciate you. Make sure you leave a comment. Make sure you subscribe, and make sure you tell a friend, and you can chime in. You have the freedom to chime in. That's what the comment section is for. I really appreciate you. See you guys on my next live. And let's see how this thing plays out in the court, because it's definitely going to play out in the court. With that, ladies and gentlemen, see you on the next live.
From the culture
To the courtroom.
This is Truth Uncut. From the culture to the courtroom, front row seats when Dennis Byron speaks. History speaks. From the culture to the courtroom, front row seats when Dennis Byron speaks. History speaks from the culture.
No cap, no spin, just facts. If it matters, we cover it. What's ready, B.I.B.